The next presentation is by Mr. Bellosillo, as outlined in CMD 18H 6.31. Please proceed.
Mr. Bender and commissioners, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. I am Rommel Bellosillo, and I'm a current resident of Toronto. I was born in the Philippines, lived a couple of years in the US, and finally moved to Toronto 6 years ago. I am hoping to settle down here and build a life. And were you probably asking why Canada and why Toronto? Well, I always look up to Canadians when it comes to protecting the environment and its people. I believe that Canadians always have a great relationship with nature and will preserve and protect it. I considered myself as an environmentalist. Although I may not be a technical expert, as some of you here, but I know that it's wrong to release toxins into the environment. It affects everything. It affects our food, it affects our water, it affects all of us. We're seeing this in Japan, when 7 years ago, the Fukushima nuclear reactors released radioactivity into the environment. We are still seeing this in Ukraine, where Chernobyl nuclear power plant released radioactivity into the environment over 30 years ago. You didn't need to be a technical expert to know that these nuclear power plants continue to harm the environment and the society. You don't need to be a technical expert to know that it is our responsibility to avoid such harm. I am here today because we should do everything we can to prevent such harm in Canada. Pickering nuclear facility is located 30 kilometers away from where I live in Toronto. Millions of people live in Toronto. This nuclear power station puts millions of us at risk. Pickering is old. The station is already operating beyond its design life. You wouldn't drive up and down 401 with a 47-year-old car. So I don't think it's reasonable to continue to operate a 47-year-old nuclear station that was designed to last for 30 years. The Pickering nuclear station is the fourth oldest nuclear station in North America, and it's the seventh oldest in the world. It is also located closer to a major urban center than any other nuclear generating station in North America. Why do we even let this happen? I believe that public safety should always take precedence above anything else. Whether at home, work, school, organization, a city, a town, or a country, we should always ensure the safety of our people. I know that when CNSC was established in 2000, its mandate was to protect the health and the safety of Canadians and its environment. In making your decision, I urge you to think of your core responsibility. OPG is a company. Its core mandate was to make money. But I feel OPG's motivation to make money conflicts with my personal safety and the safety of the environment. That is why I'm asking you to reject OPG's request to continue operating the Pickering nuclear power plant. I don't think it is acceptable to operate a major nuclear power station in GTA. Over 1 million is currently living within just 20 kilometers. In comparison to Fukushima nuclear disaster, 150,000 people were evacuated within 20 kilometers, and 300,000 people were evacuated within 30 kilometers of Chernobyl nuclear station. In making your decision whether to accept or reject OPG's request, please imagine an accident like Fukushima or Chernobyl happening in Pickering. Please imagine how accident at Pickering would impact so many people. Not just hundreds of thousands of people, like in Chernobyl or Fukushima, but millions of people. Please imagine how such accident would affect my adopted home, which is Toronto. Then ask yourself, would such accident be accepted by Canadians? This brings me to another major concern that I have, which is emergency preparedness. Are we really prepared for a nuclear accident in Toronto? I've heard government officials claim that we are, but I'm a little skeptical. Most worst accidents happen not because it is caused by a tsunami or an earthquake. It is because we are complacent. We do not think that accident will happen or could happen. And when it does, we're all caught unprepared. Accidents, mistakes, and malfunction do occur. Equipment fails, human errors, events that are considered impossible happen. So emergency preparedness should be up to date and should be based on large scale, especially with nuclear accidents. After Fukushima and Chernobyl, governments had to protect hundreds of thousands of people. At Pickering, the government would have to protect millions of people. Can anyone show me a study showing that a 20-kilometer around Pickering could be safely evacuated? 20 kilometers takes you to Victoria Park or the beach or a neighborhood. How do we assist people to safety, especially the vulnerable ones, such as the elderly, the sick, and the children? We all know that within these 20 kilometers, there are schools, there are hospitals, and assisted senior living facility. Do all these schools and hospitals have their own nuclear emergency plan? I think there is a public awareness issue that will only make a nuclear accident worse in Toronto. I work in a health food company in Scarborough, which is approximately 30 kilometers away from Pickering Nuclear Power Station. And most of my coworkers don't even know how to get the potassium iodide pills. I have to inform our company's safety committee and order it myself so that we could have it pre-stock. OPG hasn't done anything to tell my coworkers in Scarborough what to do in an event of an accident. They haven't told them either that they can order KI pills online for free. But I've seen OPG ads on TTC promoting nuclear power, but I haven't seen ads in Scarborough or in downtown Toronto telling people how to get or how to order it. I'd like to know how much OPG spent on advertising campaigns promoting nuclear power. If Commission could ask OPG how much it spent on promotional campaigns, I'll be grateful. I think OPG should also spend at least an equal amount of money to tell people how to prepare for a nuclear accident. I ride the TTC on a daily basis like most of Torontonians. It would have been great if we see these ads regarding how to get these pills. Recently, Toronto City Council passed a motion requesting to strengthen emergency responses, which includes all awareness campaign. I totally support it, since I never receive any information on how or what to do in case of a nuclear disaster. I am also concerned by the Pickering Station risk to water. Pickering is located on Lake Ontario, beside Lake Ontario, which is Toronto's source of drinking water. Any nuclear accident could significantly impact all Torontonians and other communities around it. The station also uses water in the lake as its cooling system, and that changes the ecology and the marine life in the lake. Lastly, I'm deeply concerned about how OPG will manage the nuclear waste that the Pickering Nuclear Power Station has created and will leave after it closes. I support Pickering closure, but even once it's closed, radioactive waste it has produced will still be stored on the shore of Lake Ontario. If you ask Torontonians today whether they support nuclear waste on site, on the lake, so close to the city, they would say no. Most community would say no. But why OPG keeps that's why OPG keeps this nuclear waste at Pickering. Right now, OPG's plan is to simply close the station and wait for 40 years before it figure out how to clean it. I believe they should do more, and that CNSC should reject that proposed plan. Please make sure that there is some opportunity. Please make sure that there should be an opportunity for Torontonians and the City of Toronto to consult on how this waste is stored. Finally, I thank you all for listening to my concerns. I think that we should all learn from Chernobyl and Fukushima. Those places are still unlivable, and we don't want that to happen into our city. People as far as 50 kilometers from Fukushima were affected, and there are more than 5 million people, or 5 million population within 50 kilometers of Pickering. I don't think anyone would build one of the largest nuclear power plants in the middle of the country's largest urban center or urban area today. We should not put profits at the expense of our safety and the expense of the people that we love. We should not put profits at the expense of the environment. With all these reasons, I humbly ask the CNSC to please be on the right side of the history and reject OPG's proposed renewal of its license to operate Pickering Nuclear Power Station. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Were you here for the last 2 days? A lot of the issues you raised already been discussed. Were you here? I just want to know if you were here or listened for the last 2 days.
I was here last Monday, but I didn't stay for the whole entire hearing.
Okay. So who wants a question? Ms. Penny?
Thank you for that. Yeah, and as Dr. Binder said, we have covered off a number of the issues that you've raised and, in the context of other interveners, but one that we haven't has to do with the discharge of the thermal plume. We talked at length earlier with Department of Fisheries and Oceans about the entrainment and impingement of fish and the authorization that's in place for that. So we won't cover that ground again, but I would like CNSC staff to remind us how the thermal plume is regulated. And I'm not sure if there's anyone here from the Ministry of MOECC or not, but yeah, if you could, thanks.
Jerry Frappy for the record, so I'd ask Andrew McAllister to talk about the regulation and whether there's any issues, I suppose, is appropriate as well.
Thank you, Mr. Frappier. Andrew McAllister, Director in the Environmental Risk Assessment Division. Thermal discharges are actually regulated under a number of regimes. They're regulated under the Nuclear Safety Control Act, as well Environment and Climate Change Canada, who aren't here tonight but will be available tomorrow and Friday, also examine it under the deleterious substance provisions of the Fisheries Act. And finally, the Ontario Ministry of Environment and Climate Change, who will be here on Friday, regulated through their environmental compliance approval process. From CNNC staff's perspective, OPG undertook a thermal risk assessment regarding their thermal discharges, looking at both cold water, thermally sensitive species. We've used the round whitefish as sort of that sentinel species, given its thermal sensitivities, as well as more warmer water species that inhabit the area. The conclusions of that thermal risk assessment was that there was no unreasonable risk to the fish species, to the fish communities in the area. There was one occasion where there was a localized exceedance of a thermal benchmark that was very small from a spatial extent and occurred on one occasion. So CNSC staff and Environment and Climate Change Canada as well concluded that there was no unreasonable risk to the fish. That being said, we're not sort of sitting back and thinking our job is done. OPG is going to be conducting 2 more years of thermal monitoring to verify those findings.
OPG, did you want to add anything?
Raphael McCall for the record. The only component I'll add to what was just said is with respect to the environmental compliance approval that OPG has with respect to our thermal discharge. So we have an approval which allows OPG to discharge the water that's returned back to Lake Ontario. There's 2 conditions. One, that the delta T cannot exceed 11 degrees, and also that the 24-hour value cannot exceed 36 degrees. I'm sorry, 32 degrees. There's actually there's conditions for various times of the year. So the 11 degrees is standard, but the 24-hour value actually increases during the summer months.
And just to close that off, and if you do exceed either one of those thresholds, do you have to report, and what are the consequences?
Raphael McCall for the record. Yes, if we do exceed either one of those 2 conditions, it is seen as an exceedance of the approval, and we're required to notify the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change. And the consequences of that is that they will review the cause, and they do have the ability to issue an environmental penalty if they choose to.
I understand, I'm led to believe that Health Canada wants, somebody from Health Canada wants to make a statement. Health Canada?
It's Kevin Buchanan for the record. So I felt it might be appropriate that we address some of the concerns with the emergency planning in Ontario. It's obviously come up in discussions before, as was noted by the Commission. But I want to add some additional points to the discussion. So I'm going to make an outright statement. Health Canada believes the current version of the PNERP, the Provincial Nuclear Emergency Plan, is adequate. So you know that, and you've heard before, that Health Canada contributed a body of work in the form of a modeling experiment to inform the current version of the PNERP. So in that modeling report, we had used 2 source terms. The source terms were provided by the CNAC staff and expert advice that we respect and require to do our modeling. So in that, the source terms that were provided, they could be classified as an INS Level 7 event from the perspective of the activity of the iodine content, right? So that's important that people understand, is that we did model events that could be classified as an INS 7 level event. So when we did this modeling, we discovered that the plume exposure zone could extend beyond the previously defined primary zone in the 2009 PNRP, right? And what I'm going to get to is that there's been changes to the PNRP to address the issues of public protection. And so when we talk about plume exposure planning zones, that's a term out of Reg Doc 210, right? And the modeling indicated that. So at the conclusion of this work, Health Canada recommended that the province of Ontario increase its zone sizes to adequately protect the public. So we understood that this led to the inclusion of the contingency planning zone, and we are extremely happy to see the results adopted into the 2017 version of the PNRP. And just to right from the PNRP, so that everyone's aware, the 2017 PNRP addition of a 20-kilometer contingency planning zone beyond the 10-kilometer detailed planning zone addresses the same response issues that are covered by IEA's recommendations for urgent protective action planning zone, which was a 15 to 30 kilometer recommendation. So it falls within that, and I think people need to understand that. Also, from the 2017 PNRP, and this is a quote out of the PNRP, and we should all understand this, is that the contingency planning zone is an area beyond the detailed planning zone where contingency planning and arrangements are made in advance so that during a nuclear emergency, protective actions can be extended beyond the detailed planning zone as required to reduce the potential for exposure. So that's significant. That's a significant change to the way we approach our planning and prepare ourselves for an emergency.
So
I'm going to go on to say something, though, and I'd hope that everyone carefully consider the words that I'm about to say. Because of the intent of that statement in the 2017 PNRP version and the definition of the designated plume exposure planning zone, Health Canada recommends and would expect that all arrangements in the contingency planning zone be reviewed to ensure that they are implementable and executable. Implicit in this is the understanding that the protective actions taken in the detailed planning zone may be extended into the contingency planning zone, right? And that is the improvement that this PNRP has made to the current plan. So with this may include protective actions such as evacuation and the pre-distribution of KI. And that's as per para 2.3.4, public preparedness requirements in Reg Doc 210.
Okay.
That's it, President Binder.
So this was very useful. You're going to be here tomorrow morning?
I certainly am, President Binder.
Because you'll have to repeat all of this tomorrow morning, I predict. So thank you for that, and we'll continue. You have, for this intervener, you have another question?
I just wanted to reassure the intervener that despite this fairly high-level, broad-stroke discussions we've had on emergency preparedness, there are still, for my part, a lot of details that need to be provided, which is going to be tomorrow morning, where we're going to ask about not just the policy and the planning and the philosophy and the intent, but the actual action. How are you going to do this? Where is that? How are you going to get it to them? Be reassured that those are questions that I still have, but I'm not clear on how they're going to operationalize the PNRP, and I'm going to be asking for those details tomorrow or Friday.
Okay, anything else? Any other question? Any final remarks?
I would just like to thank everyone. It's just such a great honor to be here and in front of this panel, experts. It's my first time to speak in such event, and I'm deeply humbled. It's a little nerve-wracking, actually, to be honest, but it's because our safety is on the line here. I am compelled to to do this. Thank you so much again.
Okay, thank you.